Today we're going to begin actually a new series of ideas in the field of Jewish philosophy, Hashkafa, and we've covered a great deal of material in Hashkafa up to now, and what we're going to try to do now in the next number of sessions, and it's difficult to say how many sessions, depends on the group, is discuss the critical concepts that are associated with the notion of the Mashiach and the Messianic concepts. But we want to investigate the answers to a number of very important questions, especially in today's times when the concept of Mashiach is extremely relevant. We hear all around us constantly talking about the Mashiach. We have songs about the Mashiach. We have record covers constantly alluding to the fact that the Mashiach is about to arrive and so on. Yet if you ask different people about what is the concept of Mashiach and what is he supposed to do when he gets here, most people are very confused by that. Many people have no idea of what the Mashiach is about, why there is a belief in the Mashiach, what he does when he gets here, where he's coming from, how will the entire process materialize. Are there more than one? Is there two? Was the Mashiach here before? Is this the first time he's showing up? When is he coming? All these different questions many people have in their mind as they hear constantly about the Messianic period, and it's very difficult to really get some good information about that. Now, we will see that as we go into the concept of Mashiach, we will go into it very deeply, not on a simple basis. And you will begin to get a kind of understanding which is very rare and very difficult to achieve. In terms of the sources, there is a great deal of material about the Mashiach in the Talmud, in the Medrash, and in different areas the commentators spoke about, but it tends to be very confusing. And there's a number of reasons for that. One, because there is somewhat of a controversy about the actual Messianic figure himself and what it will be like. Also, there are different scenarios about the Messianic process, and this is very critical. All of us, when we think about the Mashiach, we think it's going to happen in a certain way. You see, in a certain type of process. And this is a very serious mistake. It will not happen in a certain way, because that the way it happens depends on us. Which means that the Messianic process is basically variable. It can change depending on the people themselves, on the Jews themselves. If the Jews behave one way, then the Messianic process looks this way and will happen this way. If the Jews appear another way, or if they behave in a different way, then the whole Messianic process could appear at total odds in a whole different way. To such an extent, and I can tell you this absolutely, that if the Jews behave in manner A versus manner B, the Messiah or the Mashiach looks totally different. You would not recognize them from manner A to manner B. So we see that the critical aspect of the Mashiach is very important, because it means that the way it appears and how it's going to happen is incredibly variable and depends on the behavior of the Jews themselves. This is something that very few people realize. Everyone thinks that it's a fixed mode of some sort, a fixed procedural event that's going to happen in a certain time, in a certain way, and so on. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. What the Rebbeinu Shem did essentially was he said, I will leave up to you what the Messianic process will be like. You will shape it, you will paint the picture of the Messianic era. That's what the Rebbeinu Shem said, that's what God said. Now what we really have to study, if we want to understand the concept of the Mashiach, we have to understand some very important things. We have to understand not only some of the basic concepts, but we have to understand how the Messianic process can vary with respect to the behavior of the Jews. How is it possible? Most of us think that, who is the Mashiach? The Mashiach is a person, or something like that, some supernatural figure who's going to come down out of heaven in some kind of fiery chariot, come down and change the world. What's he going to do, basically? Well, he's going to change the world. He's going to gather up all the Jews, and he's going to take them all to the land of Israel, to Eretz Yisrael, and then he's going to build the Beit HaMikdash, and he's going to conquer all the Goyim, and so on. But is this in essence what the Mashiach will do? Only very superficially. Very superficially. There's a whole other side to what the Mashiach will do that very few people are aware of. In fact, it's because that so few people are aware of what he really is going to do that none of us really, in many ways, can appreciate when he does come. You see, because we really don't know what he's going to be doing for us. We don't even know how human nature will evolve or change as a result of his coming. You know, the old standard, the joke that I heard, which I think is a somewhat interesting joke, even though many people talk about Mashiach and so on, but when it comes actually down to really wanting him to come, it's a different type of feeling. There was once two husband and wife who were discussing. The Sarah was speaking to her husband Yaakov, and she was saying, Yaakov, what are we going to do? I hear that the Mashiach is coming. He may be coming any day from now. So Yaakov said to Sarah, so what's wrong with that? So Sarah said, it's terrible. We have a beautiful home here. We have a beautiful car outside. You've got a great job. What's going to be when the Mashiach comes? I heard we have to move to Israel, into the apartments over there, and deal with what? Or what is the situation? What's going to be with us? So Yaakov says, don't worry, we've been 2,000 years in exile, we've run from one Goyish land to another. God saved us from all the Goyim, God will save us from the Mashiach. Now, that kind of attitude presupposes some kind of thinking. You know, the reason why Sarah and Yaakov thought this way in the story is because they understand the entire Messianic process in an incredibly superficial way. You see, there was the Mashiach, was an individual who was going to come and yank them all out from America, this great place called America, and stuff them in a tiny place called Eretz Yisrael under primitive conditions, lowering our standard of living and making us essentially miserable in one way or another. Is it any wonder why really nobody's waiting for the Mashiach? It is my objective that by the time we're finished with this class, you will really be able to wait for him, because you will know exactly what will happen when he arrives. And this is a very, very critical thing. But the matter is not simple. The matter is extraordinarily deep. But all of you are capable of understanding it precisely, and that's what we're going to be spending our time on. I will be going over some material in this class which I will have said in previous classes. But I wish to say to those people who may become anxious that it is not a review. And the reason why I have to say that is because what I have to do in order to understand some critical concepts about Mashiach when we go into it is to examine some of the concepts we've said in the past and reorient them in a different way. So it will not be actually simply a summation of what's been done up to now in any sense. But we need some understanding so that we can move off into a different direction. But we were moving off into the direction of understanding what the Messianic period is about, something about the character and the personality of the Mashiach, what is he supposed to be doing, what's going to happen when he gets here, what will happen to all the Goyim and all the Jews when he does arrive, how will that process unfold, and also what's very important, what does all this have to do with the future world called Olam Haba? What is the connection of all these things? First of all, it's important to distinguish between the Messianic period and the future world. Many people are confused and think it's the same thing, and I want to explain that. There is a period which the Torah tells us will come at the end of time. And I will get into the concept more precisely. That period is called the Messianic period. In Hebrew, it refers to as the Messianic period, or the Amos, the days of the Mashiach, the days of the Messiah. What the Torah tells us is that toward the end of time there will be a period which will be exclusively known as the Amos Mashiach. Following that period, there will be another event called the inception of Olam Haba, or the inception of the world to come. That is a world which never ends. The Messianic period ends. It will exist for a specific amount of time. After the Messianic period ends, will start another period called the period of Olam Haba, which is the future world, the world to come. that world will never end. And what we want to understand is, what is the Messianic period and what is Olam Haba? Can we in some way have a glimpse of what Olam Haba is? The Talmud says that Olam Haba is Ayin Lo Ra'asa. No eye has ever seen the world to come. No eye has seen it. What does that mean, no eye has seen it? It's an important statement. When it says no eye has seen it, it doesn't mean only humans. No malach, no angel, no physical or spiritual being has ever seen Olam Haba, or can even begin to fathom what it looks like. Not at all. It is impossible to even begin to fathom it. Okay, so that's the difference between the future world, world to come, and the Moshe Mashiach, where the world to come, no one has ever seen it, not even an angel. Now there are several reasons for that. The world to come has never been seen because it doesn't exist yet. That's the main reason. It doesn't exist. It is a world to come. The second reason why no one has ever seen it, because that world, it is such a different place from this world that it's impossible to imagine, even by a spiritual being. That's how remarkably different it will be from this life. Now the question that we have to ask is it possible to understand what that world is like? Can we understand a world where even a spiritual being himself can't understand it? Obviously, it's very difficult. But I think that I can give you a glimpse of what that world will be like. A glimpse of it. And to the extent that you work on yourself spiritually, you will understand what that world is like by yourselves. It says Shabbos is Me'ein Olam Haba. Shabbos is, to some extent, a shadow of what Olam Haba is. Now, you may say, well, what does that mean? In Olam Haba there's Cholent? No, obviously not, because Shabbos is not Cholent. It obviously is much greater, but if you were able to keep Shabbos the way it should be kept, you would have a glimpse of what Olam Haba is like. You would have a slight glimpse of it. Because the light of Shabbos is a somewhat predetermined or preset light of what Olam Haba will be like. Only on a very small degree. But we will be going into this. Now, in order to understand the future, we have to understand the past. And as everyone knows, people who've been in this year before, I'm a big student of the past. And there are certain reasons for that. Because the past tells us what the present is about and what the future will be. And when I mean the past, I don't mean 50 years ago, I don't mean 1,000 years ago. I mean 5,747 years ago. Now what happened 5,747 years ago? The world was created. And one man was created, his name was Adam HaRishon. So we would have to understand certain things about Adam HaRishon to understand basic concepts about the Mashiach. We have two big problems with the Messianic era, two very big problems. The first problem has to do with Adam. And before we can get into the problems themselves, let's go over just some basic background. Why did God create existence, or the world that we know it? God created existence, or the world that we know it, in order to do good, in order to create a being who is somewhat separate from him, and make him the recipient of some great reward, some great ecstatic experience. That being which he created is called the neshama, or the soul. That being was given self-awareness, so that it knew what it was. It can turn around to God and say, you, me, you. So God created a being who in a certain sense was outside of it in consciousness, Kaviyachol, so that being called the neshama can literally turn around and know that it is separate from all reality. It has something called self-awareness. You see, it knows that it is. A chair doesn't know that it's a chair, but a neshama or a person knows that he's a person. He has what's called a sense of his own self, of who he is. What the Buddha said to that neshama was that I want to give you a very great good, an ecstatic experience. Since you possess consciousness and the ability of self-awareness, I can give you an experience which is awesome, incredible. When the neshama said to God, what is that experience? The Baruch Shem said, that is the experience of me. If you can understand who I am, and if you can experience me to some degree of what I am, that will be the most pleasurable, ecstatic, exalted experience you will ever have. You see. Why? Because to experience me, God says, is to experience ultimate and absolute beauty. God is nothing more than the perception of beauty in its most powerful, perfected form. God is the source of all beauty. That which is complete and balanced and perfect and whole and symmetrical, you see, in its most perfect way, is what's reflected from God's presence, not God himself, because God is beyond these things. But essentially, everything which is beautiful or unity or one is the Baruch Shalom. And what the God said, what the Baruch Shem said to the neshama is, by you experiencing me, that aspect of me, called my perfection, my beauty, to the extent that you experience it, it will be an ecstatic experience. So the neshama turns around and says, but I can't do that. I can't just experience that without doing something to earn or to produce that experience. Why? Because I'm like you, and just like you're a creator, you are a creator, you are a producer, God is a creator. God cannot take. If we would say to ourselves, what is the one most important feature about God? We would say that God cannot take. He doesn't know what it means to take. Because God can only give. God can only create. So God is an absolute giver or an absolute creator. When He created the neshama, He created the neshama in a sense in His image. To the extent that the neshama is like a shadow of God. It's a slight parallel to God. And it parallels God in the sense that it also has a desire to give or create. So the neshama turns around and says to God, I can't just sit here or accept this great reward you want to give me, because I'm like you. I can't take totally. I can take basically because I'm a created being. So my existence also was given to me. But since I was created in your image and I have an aspect of you, I in some way must contribute to this great ecstatic experience you want to give me. So what the Baruch Shem says, fine, I will give you the opportunity to earn this experience. And simply not take it without earning it, without any effort. So what did the Baruch Shem do? The Baruch Shem did very simply. What he did was to create a certain place. He created a certain environment. And in this environment, he hid. He hid himself so that his presence was no longer visible in the way that it should be. His presence was no longer discernible. So what he did was he took the neshama and put it into a physical body, where the neshama now is in that body, and that person, who's a combination of both, can only experience reality through the five senses. And he put it into a physical world. He created the whole physical universe and he put it into a physical world. And the person awakes and he looks around and he doesn't see God at all. He only sees what he's capable of through the five senses. And then the Baruch Shem says, now you bring me back to the world. You find me. You see. And when you find me and you bring me back, the experience itself of bringing me back will be your ultimate destiny. Because then you will have me forever. You see how it works? The greatest pleasure and the greatest ecstasy that we can experience is in some way connecting to the spirituality of God himself. But since we demand, we as people, and we as neshamas, we all have, we demand that we earn it. The Baruch Shem says, then you create that experience with me. So I will hide from that world. I will create a world where you can't see me anymore. It is your job to bring me back, and it is your job, once you brought me back, then you will be able to experience me. And then what will happen is, I will come back in the world, you see, where I've hidden before, and I will transform it, so that no longer will I be hidden from it. And then everyone can see me without effort. So essentially what the Baruch Shem did was to create two separate stages. One stage is a stage called Olam Hazeh, or this physical world, and the next stage is a stage called Olam Haba, or the world to come. The world to come is a state where the person will exist, and he will be able to directly access the experience of God. And with that experience, he will feel incredible ecstasy and true joy. But in order to get to that state where God's presence is totally obvious and manifest, the Baruch Shem took the neshama and put it into a body and created another state of existence called the physical world, where he hides, and where he says, bring me back. It is your job to bring me back. And if the person brings God back into the world, he will have experienced God's presence by his own effort, because he chose to bring God back. And that's the essence of what this world is about. Now, what is the choice? Well, God creates a man, the first man, called Adam Rishon. And he puts the neshama of Adam Rishon into a body, and he says to Adam Rishon, here, I am not fully visible to you anymore because you are in a body, but I will give you a commandment. And I say to you, don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the Eitz Hadat, Tov and Ra. Don't eat from that tree. I command you that. Adam, the first man, feels an incredible yearning to eat from that tree. He feels that there's something about that tree that would make him into an exhilarated being. But he knows that he shouldn't do it, so he thinks, what should I do? Well, depending on what he does, that which he does depends on how he sees God and what he wants to think of himself. And this is the bottom line. If the Adam, the man who he created, wants to feel independent, he wants to feel like a powerful being by himself, he will ignore what God says and says, I'll do what I want. And then he will run after the tree of knowledge of good and evil and eat it, and gain power that he thinks he will gain by himself, irrespective of what God says. The other alternative is to recognize that he was created by God, and because of that he must follow his will, because ultimately the only true existence is to connect to God's presence. If he does that, what happens? If he does that, if he listens to what God says, and he does not eat of the tree of life, he will have passed the test. And that's what it is. It is a test. It is a choice, where the Rebbeinu Shalom says, listen to me or don't listen to me. And that's what all life is about. All life is a test, where the Rebbeinu Shalom wants to see whether or not you want to bring him into your life or not. And how do you say whether or not you bring him into your life? You tell God that you bring him into your life because you listen to what he says to you. You listen to his will. That's how you connect with him. You submit, or you push down your own arrogance and your own ego, and you say, it is God who created the world, and it is his presence which is behind all existence. When you do that, when you choose God over yourself, you bring him back. That's the entire way that you do it. And the way God stimulates that choice is by giving you a mitzvah or a commandment. That's what a mitzvah is about. That's what a commandment is about. When God says to you, don't or do, essentially he's put you into a state of conflict. You must sit down and decide, what should I do? You see, you must decide whether or not you will adhere to God or not. But by deciding whether or not you're going to live to God, that decision essentially tells yourself and God what kind of relationship you want to have with him. The relationship that you will have with him will determine the kind of relationship you will have for eternity. You see the simple equation? It's a very simple process which is behind the complexity of life. You determine to what extent you will relate to God in the future world, which will go on forever. You determine that. You determine that by the way you relate to him now, and the way you submit your will to him now. This was the job of Adam Rishon. This was his job. Now God gave Adam Rishon a certain amount of time to do it. He gave him an amount of time until when? Adam Rishon was created on Erev Shabbos, on the 6th day. And the Rebbeinu Shalom said to him, don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, tree of knowledge of good and evil. He said, don't eat at all from this tree. You can eat from all the other trees. Now he was created on the 6th day. If he had adhered to that, if he would not have eaten that until Shabbos, until the 7th day, everything would have changed. He would have passed. Because that particular trial that God gave him was not an eternal trial. It was a trial that was only supposed to last about 6 to 9 hours. That's all. And if Adam and Chava, his wife, did not eat from that, and Shabbos would have ensued, which is the beginning of the 7th day, lo and behold, an amazing, amazing thing would have happened. What would have happened? Olam Haba would have started then. It would have started then. The future life would have started at that point in time, on Shabbos. That first Shabbos should have been the beginning of a new time or a new phase of a new experience. Because Adam failed to do it. That Shabbos was not the beginning of a new time, but it was a continuation of the old time. So what the Rebbeinu Shalom did and said to Adam, since you have failed to do what I said, I will give this to your children. And if they fail, to their children, and so on. So God fragmented all the souls that came from Adam. Adam Rishon's soul used to contain all souls. And God fragmented this one super neshama into different people. So that what Adam should have achieved by himself must now be achieved by many men. And his children were given that task. And if they failed, their children, and their children, and so on. So that each set of children, or each generation, would have that task to do what? To collectively listen to God's will, and by listening to His will, to force Him back into creation. To force God to come back into the world, the physical world. Now, you may say, well, what happens if they fail? How long should this process go on? The answer is 6,000 years. That's the magic number. 6,000 years. From the time that Adam was created, for the next 6,000 years, man will have the opportunity to bring them back and create the eternal future life. It is now 5,746. So obviously we haven't done the job yet. We only have 253 years left, and we still haven't done the job. Which means we've come a long way and botched up a lot of good opportunities. Now, where does the Messianic period fit in? Well, first of all, the Messianic period is towards the end of the 6,000 years. What the Torah says is that you have been given 6,000 years, and towards the end, or the climax of the 6,000-year period is called the Messianic period, when the Mashiach will come. That's what it is. It is the tail end of the 6,000-year period. When does it start? That depends on a lot of factors. But let's say, for example, that the Messianic period starts this year. Let's say the Mashiach arrives this year. How many years will he be around? How long is the Messianic period? The answer is 253 years. Since it's 5,747, he will exist, the Mashiach will exist, and the Messianic kingdom will exist until the year 6,000. At the end of the year 6,000, there is no longer Messianic period. It ends. At the end of the year 6,000 comes the great and final day of judgment, when everything is judged. And then, from that year on, starts the period called Olam Haba, or the future world. So therefore we see a very interesting thing. We see that from the year 1, you see, to the year 6,000 is a period called Olam Hazeh. It's a period called the physical world. The tail end of that period is called the Yemot HaMashiach, or the Messianic period. The tail end of it. After the year 6,000 starts a new world, which is a spiritual world. And that world is called Olam Haba. Do we see the chronology? Gotta get the facts straight first. Don't confuse it. The Messianic period is the last period before the year 6,000. After the year 6,000, there is no more Messianic period. It's a period called Olam Haba, which is the future life. There is no Messiah in that life. In that time, there is no Mashiach or anything that we know of the way it is today. It is a new world that no eye has ever seen. Now, with this information in hand, we have an important question to ask. A big difficulty. Wait a minute. Hold on one second. What did I say before? Didn't I say that Adam Rishon was the first man who was given the opportunity to bring God back into the world? Didn't I say that? Didn't I also say that he had 6 hours to do it? Didn't I say that if he would have done it, Shabbos would have become Olam Haba? Right? Wait a minute. If Adam had that amount of time to bring in Olam Haba, and if he would have succeeded, so we would have had 2 periods. The period of the test or the trial of Adam and Olam Haba. Where is the Messianic period? Where is the Messianic period? So we see an amazing thing. That if Adam Rishon had succeeded, in other words, if he did not do the sin, there would never have been a Messiah. Because instantly, it would have ushered in the period called the world to come, Olam Haba. Now that's a strange view, isn't it? Because it's a strange view because the Torah says that there is a Mashiach, and that there will be a Mashiach. So the question is, What happened to him? We see an amazing thing. Did God want Adam to sin or not? Obviously, he didn't want to sin. He gave him a test. God would have preferred Adam should have passed the test. That's what he wanted. Adam sinned against God's will. But we're saying that the whole Messianic period is only a result of Adam's sin. If Adam had not sinned, Shabbos would have been Olam Haba. There would never have been a Mashiach, and there would never have been a Messianic period. That's what we're saying. Which is a very strange thing. It sounds like the Mashiach is wrapped up in the sin of Adam. And were it not for the fact that he sinned, there would never have been a Mashiach. Strange concept, isn't it? Big problem. Big problem. What's the answer? The answer is a very strange one. No, the truth is there would have been a Mashiach. That's not true. There would have been a Mashiach. Adam would have been the Mashiach. Adam, or Rishon himself, was the first man and the first Mashiach. It was the intention of God that man would be the Mashiach himself. That is essence what it's all about. Now that should give us a clue to what the Mashiach is all about. That statement that I just told you. If we can understand what that means, that Adam should have been the Mashiach, we can have some kind of idea of what the Mashiach is all about. You see, because that's where it all started from. That's where it all started from, and that's the clue to understanding the inner depth of what the Mashiach is all about. This 6,000-year number is an important number to understand. The Gemara says it and the Medrash says it. But there are some conflicting opinions about it. According to the Rambam or Maimonides, the 6,000-year period is not an exact one. You see. But according to Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto and Rav Yitzchak Luria, the Ari, and all the Kabbalists, that is a critical number. And these shurim are essentially based on the thinking of Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto and all the Kabbalistic school, which is the school that we essentially accept today, you see, as the binding school of thought on Judaism. So therefore the 6,000 years is the maximum number. The world self-destructs in 253 years. Let me explain something. Well, let me explain something. People think that when a person dies, he goes to Olam Haba. That is absolutely false. He cannot go to Olam Haba because there is no Olam Haba yet. He goes to a place called Gan Eden. Gan Eden. Or Gan Eden or Eden. Or Gan Eden, the upper Gan Eden. And essentially, it's critical to understand what that is. There is a certain place in the spiritual world that is called Gan Eden or the Garden of Eden. Gan Eden, Garden of Eden is also the place where Adam was placed in when he first had the test. But after he failed, certain things, critical things happened, and Gan Eden became to be used as a term which was a place where the shamas go after a person dies. Now, I will explain to you in a minute why the neshamas go to Gan Eden and why they don't go to Olam Haba. Olam Haba will only occur after the year 6,000, you see. But there is a heaven and there's an earth. There are spiritual places in heaven. That place where all the neshamas is called Gan Eden, not Olam Haba. It is a point of great confusion. When we're finished with these shurim, with this series, you will understand exactly all the different terms and the relationship of all these different terms. In order to have a deeper understanding, in order for us to have a deeper understanding of what's going on, we have to understand the fundamental scenario of all existence. And you may say, you mean we can get the entire fundamental scenario on the blackboard? The answer is yes. Yes. We're very efficient these days. Now bear with me very clearly. God creates man. Man is composed of a guf, a body, and a neshama, a soul placed in that body. We've explained that the Baruch Hashem created man in this way so that he can give him great good. But he wants the man to render himself. And of course, man means both man and woman. He says, I want you to bring me back into the world. In order to do that, he created a physical reality. Now, the essential feature of a physical reality, as we've said, is the fact that it is a substance which conceals God's presence. It is a barrier. It is a barrier. You cannot see beyond the physical. You can only see through the 5 little windows that you have in your body called the senses. You cannot see beyond the senses, so you cannot come into contact with spirituality. It is a physical world which hides God's spirituality. There is an important word in Hebrew which symbolizes that state. That is a state which hides God's presence. It is called chisaron. Chisaron. Chisaron means imperfection, or incompletion, or inadequacy. Comes from the word chaser, means to be missing, to be lacking. Chisaron means something is lacking. What's lacking? What's lacking is the presence of God. What's lacking is the awareness of His absolute unity, you see. Another concept, or another word that describes this, which is very important, and you should know that, is called Hester Yichudo. Hester Yichudo. And I'd like you to remember these two words. Hester means concealment. Yichudo means His unity. Whose unity? God's unity. The physical world is a state of chason. It is a state of imperfection. Why? Because it involves Hester Yichudo. Because it blocks out God's absolute existence. And the fact that there is no other force or power in all the world but God. That fact, that critical fact that the only thing which really exists, and the only power, and the only force, and the only one that really controls all of existence is God. That is His unity, what's called His yichud. The word yichud means His unity. The yichud of God is the fact that He is the absolute ruler of all existence. This world, this physical world, conceals that, you see. That's why it is called a state of chason, because it conceals the fact of His yichud. It therefore produces a state called hester yichud, or the concealment of His unity. Do we have those words? Important words. I will not say too many words, but there are some important buzzwords or technical words that you should know. Chason is the state of physical reality, the imperfection of it. Hester yichud is the result, or the way we know God as the result of it. What the Baruch said to Adam was the following. What the Baruch said to Adam was, do the mitzvah. And if you do the mitzvah, a very remarkable thing will happen. An incredible thing will happen. You see. Well, what happens is the following. You will bring down a light or a power into your neshama. And with that power, it will transform all physical reality. That's what will happen as a result of your mitzvah. If you do the mitzvah, if you don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you will bring down a certain spiritual power, which I have waiting. I have waiting for you, and when it comes down to you, it will enter you into the neshama, and it will transform all physical reality. You see. Now, wait a minute. If you transform physical reality, what will happen? If you transform physical reality, will you have a state of hester yichud? No. Because if physical reality loses its ability to hide God, then God becomes present. That therefore becomes a state called Gilui Yichud, or the revelation of His unity. That world where God is suddenly revealed, because man forced Him back into the world, so to speak, is called the world of Shleimut. Shleimut means perfection. This world, the physical world as it exists, is called chason, or imperfection. But in a world where Adam would do a mitzvah and bring God back and transform the physical nature of reality, that's called the world of shleimus, or perfection. And that would result in a state called Gilui Yichud, or the revelation of His unity. Do we see the structure? So what the Baruch said to Adam was, change the world from chason. Take away the chason. Take away the lack in the world. You see, change physical substance and allow yourself to see me again. Make a world into shleimus. That's the whole job. So what the Baruch did was, in a certain sense, create the body as a translucent substance, which means that Adam's neshama, when it was in the body, was able to see the presence of God very minimally. And what God says, make your body transparent. Change the course of physical reality and make it transparent. By making it transparent, you will establish a world of Gili Yichud. And that is Olam Haba. That is the future world. The future world is nothing more than the physical world in a transformed state, where suddenly the body becomes transparent because of the Kedusha, or the power that Adam brought down. And the state of Gili Yichud exists. Let's look at it from another angle, another fact. What makes the world into a chasson? Why is it that God's presence is not visible? Because of chasson, it's in a state of chasson. But why is this world in a state of chasson? What is it? The world is in a state of chasson because the world itself was created with a certain force. God used a certain type of power to create the physical world. You see, that power is called the power of evil, or Ra. I will not go into how he used it or what the nature of that power is. Suffice to say that God created a certain power which is called the power of evil, or the power of Ra. With that power, he created a physical world which has the capacity to hide him. And therefore the world was in a state of chasson. And he was hidden. And therefore we have a situation called Hester Yichud. So we see how that goes. But it was the power of evil that existed, which is the power that which created the physical world. Now, here is the real thing. When God said to Adam, do the mitzvah. What do you mean do the mitzvah? Do the mitzvah. Don't listen to your evil inclinations. Don't listen to the evil in the world. If you do that, if you listen to what I say, you will destroy this power. I have created a power called evil to create a physical world so that I can hide in that world. You see, the power of evil is not a power of real evil. It's not a power to cause pain. Important to know. The real power of evil is a power which simply creates the physical world so God can hide. That's all evil really is. Evil has nothing to do with pain, really. Evil is simply a force that God used to create a physical world where he can hide. God says, destroy that evil force. Destroy it. And when you destroy the evil force, you will destroy this world of chasson. You will raise it from a translucent state, where I'm just minimally visible, to a transparent state. But you will have done this by destroying the evil. How do you destroy the evil? By refusing to listen to your evil inclination. That's it. Your evil inclination, that little voice in your head, or that little voice in Adam's head that says, eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, eat from the Eitz Hadat, eat from it. That little voice came from the power. You see, it came from the power. And if Adam had not listened to that voice, he would have destroyed that power. He would destroy that voice and the power connected to it. And by destroying that power, he would have raised the whole physical world into a spiritual level. Do we understand this? Now that we have some of the basics, let's go more deeply into the matter. And let's shunt off now to the Messianic concept. How would Adam have done that? Where did this power come from? What is this power? What is this power? That's what I would like to discuss with you now. This incredible power, which if Adam has in his hand, he can transform physical reality. Adam was created with a soul. And that's what a person is. He is a body with a soul inside. Now, I don't know if you realize it or not, but that neshama, that soul, has 5 different parts to it. 5 different parts. Okay? Each part is connected to the other part like a chain. And each part is higher than the other part. What are the 5 parts? Okay. Let's name the 5 parts. Nefesh, the lowest part. Ruach, the next part. Neshama, the third. Chaya, Yechida. These are 5 parts. What? 5 parts of the soul. What do I mean by 5 parts of the soul? The soul is composed of spiritual substance, not physical substance. But when we say the soul is composed of spiritual substances, there are many levels of spiritual substance. Not all spiritual substance is the same, just like not all physical substance is the same. For example, in physical substance you can have gradations, like solid, liquid, and gas. Or you can have graded gradations like matter and energy, whereas each one is really physical, but matter is different than energy in the way it manifests itself. The same thing in the spiritual level. There are many different levels of spirituality, so that when you have a soul, that soul can be composed of a substance, of one type of spiritual substance, or you can have another soul which comes from a higher type of spiritual substance. Souls differ by the kind of substance that they have. There are 5 different levels of spiritual substance. 5 different levels. Each one of those levels corresponds to a name. Nefesh is the lowest level of spiritual substance. Ruach next, Neshama next, Chaya after that, and Yechida is the highest level of spiritual substance. Now all these 5 sections connect to each other. They all connect. You see, like a chain. You see. And therefore the Yechida, which is the highest one, connects to the one lower, the Chaya. That connects to the Neshama, that connects to the Ruach, and this one connects to the Nefesh. Okay? Now all 5 of these together are put into the body. All 5 together are put into the body. There are some other things there, but I won't go into the technicality. What's the difference if you have all 5 or if you only have 1 or 2? What's the difference? I will tell you the sad fact that most people today only have 1. Or piece of 1. Adam had many more. What's the difference? The difference is your sensitivity to spirituality. The more sections of neshama you have, the more gradations you find within yourself, the greater your spiritual awareness. If you look at 2 children, for example, and you see that as they grow up, one of them has a much greater sensitivity to spiritual matters, to things which are truthful, whereas the other one is much more coarse in a certain way. You know in a certain way that they have different neshamas, and you can see which one is the higher one. Because a person is born with a given neshama. That neshama has a certain level, and the level in which that neshama exists determines to a large extent what kind of spiritual sensitivity you will have. There are other things which determine it. Your deeds. If you do a lot of sins, you can damage your neshama. So you can damage your ability to access spiritual sensitivity. If you do a lot of mitzvahs, you can raise it. So therefore, you can literally add to your neshama, or you can subtract from it. You have the ability to do either. But it is your neshama which lies inside you, which gives you the awareness of spiritual matters, or even the desire to have anything to do with spiritual matters. It comes from the neshama. Now when Adam Rishon was first made, he only had 4 sections. He was missing the 5th and last one. When Adam was created, he was given a nefesh, a ruach, a neshama, and a chaya. He was not given the yechida. Yechida remained on high. It never came down. It never came down. It was Adam's job to bring it down. He was supposed to bring down that 5th part. That's what he was supposed to bring down. Now you may say, well, what's the difference if he brought it down or not? What do I care if he brought it down or not? Because when that 5th one comes down, the world is a whole different world. All of you in this room possess consciousness and awareness. If I ask you your name, you will tell me your name, hopefully. And you will tell me other information. You will tell me all kinds of things. You will tell me your understanding of the world. You will also tell me your value system. If I speak to each one of you, you will give me information about yourself, personal information, and if I say to you, what is your understanding of the world, you will reveal to me the way you understand life, and if I say to you, what's important to you, you will tell me what's important to you. But you don't understand that all these remarks that you will be making to me is an indication to some extent of what kind of soul you possess. You will not know that. Because the kind of neshama you have inside will in some way indicate the level of where your mind is at. If your mind is in spiritual matters, It is a different being than a person whose mind is in mundane matters. You see. What's the difference between a great tzaddik and a mediocre person? What's the difference? The difference is that a tzaddik has a much higher neshama, and that neshama is real, it's a real existence. And because he has a different neshama, he sees and he understands different things. He is aware of the presence of God in a way that a mediocre person is not. He literally feels it and senses it. It is possible to reach very high levels of neshama while you live, so that when you reach these high levels, you can become aware of information or things that go on in the spiritual world without even being there. Why? Because your body, through its neshamas, connects all the way up to the highest levels of spiritual worlds. Each neshama connects to a certain spiritual world. You see, if you possess these various neshamas in you, if you possess these various sections in you, the more sections you have in you, the greater your mind is, or the greater its sensitivity to what exists spiritually and what does not. There is something called prophecy, or nevuah. What is a prophet? A prophet is an individual who can see the future, or is an individual who could know mysterious matters about what God is doing with the world. But how does this prophet know it? Where does he get this information from? The answer is he gets it from his neshama. He reads it. A prophet is just like us, except he has the ability to simply connect with his neshama directly and feel the light that's coming into it from that world from which it's connected to. He doesn't feel it in the sense of seeing the spiritual light, but it pops into his mind. His mind suddenly becomes filled with different ideas and feelings. And these ideas and feelings are coming from the spiritual world. But the reason why he knows these things and we don't is because he has a greater neshama. And because he has a greater neshama, he has access to information which is not known to us. You see. Now when a person is born, is he born a prophet? No. A person becomes a prophet, which means that a person can be born with a certain amount of sections and literally increase or expand his spiritual understanding of power. The difference between a tzaddik and a regular person is not that he looks formal and he's got a beard. The difference is that he has a different neshama, a totally different neshama. Therefore, a tzaddik is always in contact with God. Not because he's thinking all the time about God. A tzaddik doesn't think about God forcefully. A tzaddik is always aware of God because his neshama tells him that God exists. He sees through a hidden eye. That's what a tzaddik is, and that's what a Jew is. What a Jew is supposed to be is a person to develop his level of neshama, so he becomes more and more aware of the spiritual world, even though he's in a body. Now, Adam HaRishon was created with 4 sections. Only was aware of the spiritual information that was had by these 4 sections and their connection to the spiritual world. So therefore, Adam could only know the information on 4 levels of reality. Adam could not know what was on the highest level of reality, which is connected to the Yechidah, because he didn't have it. If he would have had it, he would have known extraordinary matters, and this is what we have to discuss. The Buddhism said, I put you in a world of physical. I put you in a world of chasson where I hide. But the reason why I'm hiding is because you don't have soul big enough to see me. You think that you can't see me because you're in a physical body? That's true. But that's not the only barrier. There are 2 barriers. One barrier is your physical body. But there's another barrier. Is that your neshama, the spiritual power inside you, is not great enough to see me through the body. But I tell you that I can give you a bigger neshama with your body. And the bigger the neshama I give you, the more you can see while you are physical. And then if I give you the biggest neshama of all, if I give you the kingpin of neshamas, the Yechidah, which is the top level, that neshama, when it comes down into your body, will do something unheard of. It will snap the whole physical level of existence. And it will simply turn over your body, so that suddenly your body becomes transparent, and the neshama sees everything right through it. There's only one piece of neshama that can do it, and that's the Yechidah. The Yechidah is a neshama, which when it comes down and connects itself to the other 4 parts, transforms all physical reality. That's what does it. That is the kedusha, or the holiness, the power that Adam should have taken if he would have listened to the mitzvah. It is the Yechidah. That is the power which brings back God into the world. How? Because when man says, I submit my will to God, and man brings back God into his heart, Then the neshama comes down and God comes back into the world. But when he comes in the world literally demonstrates the presence of God. So the world reveals its yichud, because the world looks differently. And you don't have to think about where God is anymore. You can feel him, you can sense him. So that you can all see me in front of this room. Why can you see me? Why? What gives you the information that I exist? Your eyes, your visual apparatus, that's what does it. But what is it? It's simply something constructed in your body. It's a certain way of experiencing. You don't think that you can experience spiritual things too? Of course you could, but you don't have the eyes for it. If you have the eyes, you can see a malach, but you don't have the eyes for it. You don't have the spiritual eyes, so you cannot do that. While you're in the body, those eyes are closed. But when the punishment says, I will allow you to bring down the highest eye of all, the Yechida, and when that comes down, it will literally change the face of your reality, so that you will have the way to see me as I am in your world. You don't have to come into my world. I will come into your world, because you will suddenly see the barrier or the mask is lifted. That's the key thing. The mask is lifted. The mask is lifted because you will have taken me back. You will have taken the light, the incredible power of light, which is called the Yechida, and you will have destroyed the mask. And once you destroy the mask, you will see what you should have known all the time, that I was always here. Peekaboo, we play peekaboo with a little baby, right? That's what we do. But what is it? What do we do when we play peekaboo with a baby? We simply put something over its eyes and take it away. We don't take the object away. The object was always in front of the baby's eyes. The problem was that the baby couldn't see it. But that's the problem with the baby. Because a small infant, very young infant, connects reality with sight. What I can see exists. And if I can't see it, it's not here. Out of sight, out of mind. And out of reality. That's what a small infant is about. It takes about 6 months to figure that out for an infant. After 6 months, it's very hard to fool them. 6 to 8 months. But until then, you can play all the peekaboo games you want. Because literally, he thinks that what he sees exists. And if he no longer sees it, it doesn't exist. That's why a baby screams to no end when the parents walk out of the room, when it's 4 months. Because it thinks when the parents walk out of the room that the parent is gone. It has no idea that the parent remains in existence even beyond its own sight. It's panic-stricken. You see, that is the same peekaboo game that God plays with us. He's always here. We don't have the eyes. There's a mask in front of us. And the punishment says, bring down Yechida and take away that mask. What is this Yechida called? It has another name. It has another name, the Yechida. Okay. What is that other name? What is the other name? Melech HaMashiach. That is the Mashiach. The Mashiach is the Yechida. It is the soul. When that soul comes down, you are a Mashiach. That is the messianic power. That's the generator. That's the power of the Mashiach. Nothing else. It is that fifth neshama. When it comes down, it sits on the other four like a crown on a head. It's a funny thing when we talk about kings and sovereignty. When we want to assign a king, when we want to crown a king, what do? We put something on his head. Why do we put on his back or on his foot? Because symbolically we know that somehow there's something missing from the head. There's something missing from the head. And that true kingship or sovereignty means fitting something on the head. Like fitting something on the mind. That there's something behind the mind which is missing. And when that thing sits on the mind opens up. That opening up is the messianic process. That's what it is. When the person achieves the highest state of mind, so that suddenly he can see spirituality, he possesses the power of the Mashiach. Because that's all it is. The power of Mashiach is a power of insight. It's a power of understanding. It's a power of seeing God's presence beyond the mask. It is the Melech HaMashiach. It is the King Mashiach, the Messianic King. And it sits on a person like a crown. But wait a minute. You all have an interesting question that you should be asking me. Wait a minute. What did we just say? Didn't we just say that what? Adam Rishon has 5 parts to the neshama, he had 4 of them, and the last part was missing. And he was supposed to bring that last part down. Didn't we say that? But didn't I also say that everyone has 5 parts? That would appear to be that everyone is a Mashiach. In a certain sense, that's true. You see. It is true. Adam Rishon was created with 4 sections to his neshama, and the 5th was missing. He was supposed to bring that 5th one down. If he would have brought the 5th one down, physical reality would have been altered. And his consciousness would have been totally transformed. That new state of consciousness is called Olam Haba. That's what Olam Haba is. Olam Haba is a new state of mind that has never existed before. It's a new awareness. It's a new understanding of who God is and what He's about and how He interfaces with all of us that has never yet been known by any existing thing. And it is a state of mind such that it brings incredible simcha and joy and ecstasy beyond anything you can imagine. Because it's a source or root of all pleasure. That's what it is. It is a state of mind. All of us have that capacity. So then the question is, what's between all of us and the Mashiach? Really? The answer basically is the following. Adam Rishon, when he was first created, was created as a single person. If he would have brought down about Yechida, it would have gone onto his head. He would have been the Melech HaMashiach. Adam would have been the Messiah. Adam would have been the Mashiach. Because he is the one who will have succeeded in what? In transforming the world. When Adam failed to do this, his soul was fragmented into different parts. That means each of these sections were fragmented. What about Yechida? Yechida was not fragmented because it remained on high. It never came down. Hence it was untouched. But that Yechida will come down someday. And it will come down on the Mashiach himself. That's the difference between Mashiach and a non-Mashiach. The man who someday will stand up and become Mashiach is the man who that neshama will come down. And as that neshama comes down on him, it will fragment it in a certain way and distribute itself on all Jews. But it will all be fragmented, connected to him. You see, he will have the master crown. The master crown. The crown that Adam should have had. And that master crown will what? Will transmit its information and its light to all the minor crowns that come down. You see. That's the relationship between Mashiach and all the people, all the Jews. You see. All of you possess your own crowns. But none of your crowns will be able to do it. None of your crowns, all your crowns are essentially transmitters, so to speak. But a lot of receivers, so to speak. But the master transmitter is a crown which sits on the Mashiach's head, or the Mashiach's neshama. You see, that's the master crown. In Olam Haba, in the future world, after the Messianic period, all crowns of each individual will become its own transmitter, so to speak. You will no longer leave a master crown. In Olam Haba there is no Mashiach. Every Jew stands on his own with all the neshamas that he has, with the Yechida that he possesses. And that Yechida will allow him to see the most incredible things. From this we see what a Mashiach is. A Mashiach is nothing more than an individual who does the job that God wants. That's all it is. A Mashiach is the person who ultimately is worthy of the future life. A Mashiach is the person who has the ability to destroy the evil force by not listening to its evil inclination. And by destroying the evil force, destroying the world of Chasson. And by destroying the world of Chasson, creating a state of Gilui Yichud, of the revelation of God's unity. And a world of Shlemus, or a world of perfection. He is an individual who will transform physical substance into a spiritual one, so that the God's existence becomes absolutely manifest. That is the Mashiach. Where did he get the power? That fifth neshama. That's who does it. Adam was the first Mashiach. The man who creates Olam Haba is the Mashiach. That's it. Most people aren't aware of this. Most people think that the Mashiach is someone's going to break through the heavens and come down and save us all. That's not what it is. That's not the Mashiach at all. That's a very small version of what Mashiach is. Mashiach is the one who will create Olam Haba. That is Mashiach. That is the light of the Mashiach. And since Adam was given that essential task, Adam was the Mashiach. We have to distinguish between the Mashiach himself and all Jews. In the time of Adam, there was only one man, one person. And Olam Haba should have come from that one person. That means that Adam Rishon was the Mashiach, and he was the recipient of the Mashiach. Everything in one. He was the one individual who was supposed to create the future life, and the one individual who was supposed to benefit from it. So he was everything wrapped up in one. He was the beginning and the end of the Messianic period. Once Adam failed to do that, then the matter became more complicated. Because what he failed to do will now have to be done by a number of people, collectively. Well, if it's done collectively, then who is the Mashiach? Obviously, the matter changes, so that only one person among that collective mass would become the Mashiach, and the other ones will become the receivers of that. You see, the concept of the Mashiach being separated from the ultimate creator or the ultimate recipient of the light exists when the world became a collective, when the world became into mankind. But when Adam Rishon was only one man, Adam was supposed to be Mashiach. What I'm saying basically is the following. The Mashiach is not a man. The Mashiach is a process who is symbolized by a man, or who ultimately achieves that process. You see what I'm saying? We have been used to thinking of Mashiach as some guy, some person that's going to come along and do certain things. That's not really what it is. We think of Mashiach as some kind of savior or redeemer. That's not really the role, although it is a role, but that's not the critical. The critical thing is the Mashiach is the person who will build Olam Haba. Whoever has that central task, that is the Mashiach. So the Mashiach is a process leading towards a certain objective. And that objective is to go from a world of Chasson to a world of Shlemus. From a world of Hefti Yechudai, where God is absent or hiding, to a world of Gila Yechudai, where God is revealed. You see, that's the process, that's the critical process. The critical process of Mashiach is to destroy the evil force. And by destroying the evil power, to destroy physicality. That is what Mashiach is all about. You see, it is a process. It is an objective. And the man who does it is the Mashiach. When that task was taken away from Adam, and then he had children, what happened was the task somewhat became multiplied. So that now all the Jews would have to do it. All Jews now represent Adam Rishon. We are all a part of Adam Rishon today. We all have to do what he should have done. When we all get together and we succeed in doing this, what happens is one person among us suddenly arises from among us, and he becomes a central transmitter, you see. But all of us will have done it together. We are all part of the Messianic process. Except that if we succeed, then the process is climaxed by a single individual. That's its structure. You see, the Mashiach himself is not the one who will do the objective. He is the climax of the objective. Adam Rishon was the Mashiach, because he was the beginning and the end of the entire thing. When he failed to do what he did, it was given on to his children. So that all of us Jews have to do now what he failed to do. But if we all succeed, then we will climax it. And the expression of our climax will be a single individual who will be or have that powerful life, and he will share it with all the Jews. You see, the structure has changed somewhat. It has. But that's essentially what it is. But the critical aspect is that the Mashiach is a process. It is a process called tikkun. And that's another very important word. Tikkun. What does the word tikkun mean? Tikkun means rectification or correction. The tikkun of the chasson, or the tikkun of the law, is the Mashiach. Again, the tikkun, or the rectification of the force of evil, means its removal. Or the tikkun of the chasson, the removal of chasson, that is the Mashiach. That is the process of Mashiach. The tikkun of the state of Hesed Yichud into a state of Gili Yichud, that is the process of Mashiach. Mashiach is the process of tikkun. the critical thing. We have only scratched the surface of it. It is different in the way you've thought about it, to the extent that it may even sound like a foreign religion. And we've only scratched the surface, because the truth of the matter is, the concept of Mashiach is even beyond this yet. We will see amazing, amazing changes in the entire Messianic process, you see. We will begin to understand, as you should understand now, that the Mashiach is a process, and if this is the central process of human history, then all of human history is the Messianic process. That's really what it is. Human history is the Messianic process unfolding. Except that it's a process which Adam should have done. And if he didn't do it, his children, if not, their children, and so on. All of them should have had access to this process of Mashiach. And that's everything that's going on. Everything that goes on today is nothing more than the process of Mashiach in its basic form. And in the end of time, when we finally succeed, suddenly there will be a person that will arise, that will simply climax it, that's all. He will simply climax what we've been doing for 5,747 years. You see, he climaxes in the sense that he becomes a central generator. That's all. And that guy we call the Mashiach. But he's not really the Mashiach. He's a central generator. He's the ultimate reflector of the power of the Yechidah as it comes down. And he reflects it to all the Jews. That's what it is. That guy we call the Mashiach. But the Mashiach is greater than the Mashiach. No pun intended. The Mashiach is a process. And it's greater than any individual who symbolizes or reflects that process, or represents that process in its finality to the Jews. It's beyond him. Now what we have to discuss and discover is, has this process changed over time? Has it? Or is it still the same? Is the process of removing the Ra, of destroying the Ra, and destroying the Chasson, destroying that state of reality, is that process today the same as it was with Adam, or is it different? If it is different, it means that this Messianic process also is different, you see. And the truth of the matter is, it has changed. So that the Messianic process, as Adam knew it, is totally different than the way we know it. You see. Once Adam failed to do what he was supposed to do, no longer was the Mashiach ever again to be the same. If Adam Rishon would have been the Mashiach, that would have been a whole different situation than what would be now. Because the Messianic process itself was changed as he sinned. Now do you begin to understand what I said before? Why it's so difficult to understand things about the Messianic process? Because it changes. It changes as you change, depending on what you do. Why? Because the Mashiach is not a man. The Mashiach is a process. And as we sin, and as we transgress, as we evict God from the world through our sins, we change the way that we have to bring him back. So we change the process, you see. And that's what we have to discover, how it changes, and what's happening today. Why is the Mashiach called Mashiach? The word Mashiach comes from the word Mashach, to anoint with oil. The Jews used to crown their kings and their high priests by anointing them with oil. That's why the high priest, who is the central priest, the central Kohen, who is in charge of the Beit HaMikdash, he was called the Kohen Gadol, or the high priest, or the Kohen HaMashiach, the anointed priest. Also, the king, when Shmuel came over to anoint Shaul or David, he would put oil on his forehead. He anointed him. Why is the Mashiach called the Melech HaMashiach, the anointed king? Because he's anointed. That's the way that the Jews assigned or chose their king for the process of anointing. So the word Mashiach simply means anointed with oil. That's what it means. You see. But because of that, we think that it has to do with a person. Because we think, well, if the Kohen is a Mashiach, if the high priest is the anointed high priest, and if a king is a Mashiach, what is the Mashiach? The Mashiach's got to be some kind of a man. No. The Mashiach is much deeper than that. He is a process, or it is a process. But he is also a man. He is a man who climaxes the process. That's where the two come together. Even though the Mashiach is a process, the Mashiach is also a man. Because when that process finally comes to its finality, there is an individual who represents that finality. And that individual is called Mashiach. But he's really the finality, or the apex, or the acme, or the climax of a process that has been going on for 5,743 years.